so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You had to be there.
Right. I'm delighted to say Timmy McCarthy is the latest in our You Had to Be There series. Timmy, good morning to you. How are you?
Great. Ger, great to be here. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's great to have you in studio. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's been pre-COVID, so it's a long time. So nice to be back. Nice to be back in person.
Your list starts in 72 and finishes in 2008. So let's go sequentially here. The 1972 Cup final. This is the FAI Cup final.
So I was a Cork Hibs fan, and my father used to take me every Sunday to Flower Lodge. And you know, when you look at League of Ireland today, back then there was 25,000 people at every game in Cork at that point in time. And from sort of 68 to 74, Hibs were probably the best team in the country, along with Cork Celtic, who had Sports and Shamrock Rovers. But there was clubs like Drumcondra and Shells. So every 2 weeks we go to Flower Lodge. Then the following Sunday we go to Turner's Cross to watch Celtic lose. That was the sort of thing. And Hibs then brought in players like Dave Wigginton and Tony Marsden and players that from England, John Lawson, Sonny Sweeney from Scotland. So they brought a really great array of talent. And they had a couple of local stars, and Maya Dennehy was one of the local stars. And the background to my recollection, my memory is that the week before, Hibs played Waterford in Flower Lodge in front of 25,000 people. And if they won the game, they would have won the league. And it would have been the first time, you know, it was a big thing. They'd won the league the year before in a playoff against Shamrock Rovers. So to retain it would have been a big thing for them. And they were 2 up with 12 minutes to go, and Waterford were down to 9 men because 12 men in the field. Two guys got injured. Okay, reminiscence of last night. And Waterford got 3 goals in the last 12 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I remember my father being devastated. We used to get there an hour and a half before the game because there was a rock on the terrace where he would stand me inside the rock so I could see over people with a milk crate in that sense. And he was devastated. And, you know, I was 10 or 11 years of age, so I was upset, but I wasn't as devastated as he was. He was really upset. So the following week was Dalymount Park. My first time ever been at a soccer match in Dublin.
How did you get up?
By train.
Right.
And it was really scary. It was a really scary experience.
Big city.
You know, big city. You're coming in. We got off the train at Euston Station, and I remember my father would have a couple of drinks, and I'd get a bottle of Fanta and a packet of crisps was my sort of, you know, treat for the time. Then we'd walk up. We walked up the North Circular Road and into Phibsborough, and it was packed. The place was absolutely packed with, you know, with fans from both sides, but particularly, you know, and our perception. Well, my perception as a child of Dublin at the time was very tough. You know, it was a really tough place. So now you're an 11-year-old in Dalymount Park, and I'd have seen on TV with international matches, so it was just a huge experience.
Yeah.
And obviously Waterford were league champions, so you're coming in with not with the same confidence you had probably the week before in that sense. And Hibs wore a white jersey, green shorts, and green socks. And my favourite player was Wigginton, David Wigginton, and you know, he came from England, blonde, speedy guy, scored for fun. But that day Maya was the star, and he got the first ever hat-trick in FAI history. The only other hat-trick I was a memory of was Jeff Hurst in the World Cup. So, you know, this was really unique at any point in time. And I can remember the game where Waterford were sort of in control of the game. They were obviously buoyed by the week before and the performance of the week before, but Hibs were a really good football team. Dave, because he had come in from England and taken over as player manager, and he went on into Home Farm afterwards, but Cork played really well on the day, and but the 3 goals were sloppy goals. Like, they were really, you know, sort of
strikers' finishes.
And always his right foot. And now Maya Denny lived 1 block away from me, if you take 1 street away from me. The church field separated us, you know, so he was an idol to guys like me, you know, in a sense. And Jerry Finnegan was another local player who played on the team, so they both lived within 500 yards of me. So to see him on such a big stage and scoring 3 goals was phenomenal. I mean, it was just phenomenal on the day, you know.
Do you think that stuff like this is a bit lost to the ether in Irish football history because Hibernians don't exist anymore in the same way? Like, if that had been a Shamrock Rovers player scoring a hat-trick in 72 or a Bows player scoring a hat-trick, the first ever hat-trick, we'd hear about it a lot. Like, it's one of the things that maybe Irish football has, like, well, that club doesn't exist, so nobody can claim credit for it, or nobody can kind of lean into the nostalgia for it. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right. I believe that. I mean, Hibs had a great era. I said 68 to 74. They won league. They won two cups. They retained the following year. They won a Blacksnake Cup, which was a big competition, which was an All Ireland competition at the time.
Right.
It went on for 7 years. Only 2 Southern winners in the 7 years. And Hibs went out of business in 75, and like that, the memories of those great times were just washed away. It just seemed to be a case that you're no longer relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, my Denny. When you look at that team, Tony Marsden, Wiggy, Sonny Sweeney, Johnny Lawson, John Herrick, Nola Manny, Martin Sheehan, Joe Grady on goal. I mean, a legendary team. Played in European Cups when you had to be champions to play in European Cups and Cup Winners' Cup. And like I see on YouTube, a snippet of my Denny getting this hat trick in grainy black and white, with Jimmy McGee, God rest his soul, as the commentator. But because Hibs are gone, we've lost, as you said, if this was particularly maybe a Dublin club, it might have stayed longer in that sense, but it shouldn't be lost. I mean, he went on to play for Ireland afterwards, and I think he had 11 caps and scored a couple of goals. But 11 is a tragedy.
Yeah, nothing to be sniffed at all. Okay, so that's your first one. Maya Dennehy, hat-trick for Cork Hibs in the 1972 FAI Cup final. Do you remember much about Daly Mount on the day?
I do, and my son played later on with Bose for a period of time, and Daly Mount hadn't changed to 40 years on. It's actually scary in that sense. But what I remember about it was, it's the size of it. I mean, Flower Lodge was big at the time. I said 25,000 people, but Daly Mount, looked bigger, felt bigger. The fact it was inside in Phibsborough, right in the centre of a kind of a centre, made it more expansive, and it reminded me more of English grounds as I went to English grounds later on in my life than we say Flower Lodge, which was out in Ballintemple, which is now Páirc Uí Rinn, sort of away from the hub of the city. So
I think I asked this of Rory O'Connor when his episode of You Had to Be There was on, but like that experience of going to a match with your dad as a kid, getting up at the train and experiencing that with your dad, like that must be quite special to think back on as well, because it's a part of your upbringing, going to matches with your dad. It's nearly just a stepping stone in childhood.
It's an amazing memory for me, and just, as I said, every Sunday we went to games. Every Sunday we went to games. Cork Hibs was our team, Cork Celtic and Turner's Cross, and he grew my love for soccer. I mean, I love soccer. I really love soccer. So he grew my love for soccer, and he was a very proud Corkman. Obviously, he loved GA and other sports. He never saw me play basketball, which is actually ironic, and you consider that was my main career ultimately later on. But to have my father, introduced me to sport, introduced me to the passion of sport, introduced me to the price you have to pay to be a fan of sport, and he took me to other places, as well.
Do you mean the emotional toll of being a fan?
Yeah, the emotional toll of being a fan, that it doesn't all go well.
It doesn't all go well.
It does, because it is. And I can remember many years later when my son played Leave Ireland, he played for Athlone against Dundalk in a big game for Dundalk. And I had the pleasure of bringing my father to that game. And my son scored his first ever League of Ireland goal. And it was just a full cycle coming around that, he had brought me to the game, and now I was showing him my son at a later stage. So, yeah, very special for my late father,
So, you're talking, our next one is, we're spooling forward 13 years, and Jasper McElroy breaking the Irish basketball scoring record.
Well, this is very personal to me because he was my teammate, okay? And McElroy came into Ireland in 83. From Chicago, was one of the top 10 scorers in Division 1 college. So he was a phenomenal player, and just wasn't drafted in the NBA because he was in between sizes. He was about 6'5", and but he was a scoring machine. And in Ireland, he could play as a power forward inside, but in the NBA, you had to be 6'8", 6'9", back at that point in time. Yeah. So he kind of got lost in the journey. The other thing was interesting is how we got him was, compared to today, the world is a global game for the American college players today. Back then it wasn't. China wasn't open to them. Eastern Europe wasn't open to them. Russia wasn't open. South America. So if they didn't make it in the NBA, they looked to go to Europe. And that's how we ended up getting some players who were probably, way above the standard that, we were delivering at a point in time. So he came in 83. We won the league in our first year in 83. Phenomenal scorer. I mean, would score for fun, and 85 came then, and we played which is considered the most infamous cup final of all time, where we lost to Neptune in very controversial circumstances, and he was our main player on the team. We had 2 Americans at the time, and then we played him. Played Killarney.
Can we stop there for a second? Tell us about the controversial circumstances. Everybody home going, what happened? So what happened?
What happened was we led the entire game. And I'm not bitter about this now, 40 years
I was going to say, I'm going to bring it out. You're allowed to be bitter. I think you should be bitter about stuff like this, because what's the point of being involved in the first place?
It really hurts me because, on the day we were the better team, RT were televising it to record, showing it and record it a few weeks later. So with 2 minutes 32 seconds to go, we're winning by 7 points. And Neptune's Tom Sullivan shoots a 3-point attempt, misses. Ray Smith gets the rebound and puts it in the basket for 2 points. So the score was 89-84. And it went up on the board 89-85. And I was running up to the court and I said to the coach, the score was wrong. The score was wrong. Over the next 2 minutes, we had a number of chances. Our American got fouled, not Jasper now, because he was a scoring machine. Dale Roberts, 6'11" centre. Not a great scorer, but a great rebounder. He got fouled 4 times in the next 2 minutes. He got 4 1-on-1s and missed the 4 of them. So it never changed the score for us. We got a basket. But with 29 seconds to go, it was 91 points each on the scoreboard. And we called a timeout. And I said to the coach, the score was wrong. We are a point ahead. And our tactic was then basically, we had 30 seconds to keep the ball in that era. So we could have kept the ball if we were a point ahead. They would, but because we were 91 all, we had to go for a score. Okay? And we turned over the ball basically with 3 seconds to go, and they got a fast break and scored. 93-81, the place erupted. It was the first time they had ever beaten us, Neptune, in their own court, which was a brilliant thing for the game, I suppose, if you take it, the sort of wider view of it. We were shocked that we lost, first of all, because we shouldn't have lost, and then shocked over the situation. And then within 15 seconds, the score changed to 92-91. Sorry, we made a mistake. And we just never accepted our trophies, and we just feel that was just, it was just wrong. It was a bit reminded me of the 72 USSR Olympic USA men's Olympic final, 51-50. The Americans were winning, and the Russians took out the ball in 3 seconds to go, lost the ball. Commissioner said, play it again. Lost the ball again, and the commissioner played again. Then they scored. The commissioner said 52-51, game over, USSR wins. So that's my sad memory of the 85 Cup final.
That Neptune Demons rivalry, for anyone who followed basketball back then, would be familiar with it, but you all would have known each other quite well, and yet it was still a fairly fiery rivalry, I would imagine.
It was, I described it once like a civil war. We lived within half a mile of each other, all the players. I mean, it was actually, and and they were so we were the dominant team, and then they came in, so they were the upstarts coming in, and it's hard to know what would have happened if they hadn't won that game. I mean, history shows they won the game, but if they hadn't won it, because 3 weeks later, on the Friday night, we played them in the league decider, and Terry Strickland tipped the ball in on the buzzer to beat us by a point. And the next day, they showed the cup final on TV. So it wasn't a really good weekend in my house now. But I had no issue with that league decider. I mean, it was legit. He made a shot, and and then a few weeks later, they were going for the treble then, and we beat them in the championship final. Was a big thing for us. But in between those games, McElroy, we played Killarney, and Killarney would have been the first team to bring in Americans. They were, they started this whole American entry into Ireland, and we beat them 115-95. Dale Roberts and myself got, I think, 17 points each, and Jasper McElroy scored 70 points.
Wow!
Which was, to be with him was just like a out-of-world experience, I was scoring, I think I scored 70 points, Dale scored 70 points. We felt that we had really contributed really well, and this guy, scored, like 5 times what we had scored, and he just, he didn't miss a shot. It was just like he was in this different world. Now, they had 2 Americans, and and they were ranked 3 or 4 in the table at that stage, so it was the top of the table clash, and he just started, and I had a great relationship on the court with him and off the court, but on the court I had a great relationship and understanding with him. And I can remember the very first ball I gave him, and he got it and spun and swerved and just dropped in this little 10-foot baby shot. I said to myself, nothing but net here, this is serious. And he just went to a different level. And I sat back that night when I went home, and I said, this guy's good enough to be in the NBA. This guy was good enough to be in the NBA, and circumstances, just as I said earlier, prevented him. But to be part of an environment as a player where somebody steps way beyond the crowd now. I mean, way beyond the crowd. I mean, I was in Hampden Park when Zidane got his wonder goal, okay?
Yeah.
I was in Lanzarote when Roy Keane helped us against Holland and led the team against Holland, and I thought they were incredible performances. But to be part of an environment as a teammate of somebody who gets to just world-class level on one particular night is a very special
The
memory.
hair literally stands up at the back of your neck. That's like, it's a cliche because it's true. You can feel it going, well, this is something special.
There's even I clicked up a piece from Ger and Shane here from 10 years ago in the Examiner, and he was saying like the only twice in national competition did Jasper McElroy fail to score fewer than 39 points against Neptune. So it was obviously a team he liked playing against. There was consistency as well with him, like.
And what he was a scorer, okay? I mean, that's like, but they used to put a guy man marking him, so they'd have a guy, Joe Healy, actually, who would just ignore the game and just really trying to annoy McElroy, and he'd still get 40 points a game in that sense. Like, I think Kieran wrote in his book Hanging from the Rafters that I averaged, I think, 20 odd points against Neptune in my career. But it was irrelevant compared to McElroy.
No, that's not bad.
But you kind of come home and feel, I've really played well, and this guy is getting 40 points or 50 points. He was just brilliant.
Did you play with all the Neptune lads for Ireland then?
Yes.
Yeah. So you knock lumps off each other and then like kind of eyeball each other for the first training session and then become teammates? Or was it straight away?
It was straight away. It was straight away in that sense. No, I can't say with every single player because obviously there's individual rivalries in that sense. But I would say with 95% of them, there's
always one.
There's always, and they might feel the same about me or about some of my teammates in that sense. Like Tom Wilkinson, who played with me with Demons and then went to Neptune. He was originally from Neptune and went back to them. Like we were roommates. So Tom Sullivan and those guys were, But it was different though because when you do come in for the first day, now I was captain for most of my career, Jill, so you have to kind of put your pride in your back pocket and you're now part of the Irish team. So so if they beat you the night before or you beat them, it doesn't matter. But no, it was instant in that sense. It was great times.
Billy Bowie has been in touch to say, I was at both Waterford games. The first was crazy. 3 goals in the last 10 minutes by 10 men. Timmy mentioned Jerry Finnegan. What a player. Went to Shells afterwards. One of the first Cork players ever signed by a Dublin club.
Jerry Finnegan was a midfielder, small, stout guy. You'd look at him, and great passer of football. And again, when you look at the League of Ireland and look at soccer today, I mean, they were phenomenal players. Like Jerry Finnegan held his own against Lawson and Sweeney, who were brought in from England and Scotland as full-time professionals. He was a coal man. So Jerry Finnegan would deliver coal. There's no coalman anymore, I don't think, but he used to come around with his coal van, get a bag of coal over his shoulder with a shawl over his head to keep his hair and his neck as clean as possible, come into our house, dump the coal in, and I'm looking at this guy in awe, and because last Sunday I saw him perform for Cork Hibernians, and he went to Dublin afterwards. Great player.
Ronan O'Gara, Heineken Cup semi-final 2006. What stand out about this for you? It's the Leinster performance. Yeah,
well, it's the background to the game. He was coming to this game under enormous pressure. He was coming to the game because in a Celtic League game previously, Contoponi from Leinster had really ruled the roost, and he was coming into this game, and Munster were coming to this game where Leinster were starting to become relevant in the sense of Heineken Cups. They were starting to sort of...
Leinster beat Toulouse in the quarterfinals, and Toulouse were the powerhouse, and Leinster had done it with stunning rugby, where there was one try they scored from behind their own goal line where Hickey runs like Linford Christie was the commentary, and it was sensational. And Toulouse were supposed to beat them, they were mad favourites, but suddenly this was a coming out party for Leinster, and finally Leinster were going to ascend to the throne that they had self-appointed themselves for 5 or 10 years, but Munster were waiting, lying, thinking.
And Leinster were favourites, so it was the first time, because Munster previous to that had always been favourites, in those games up to that point in time. And so Munster were coming in under pressure, and Agar was coming in under real pressure, as Contoponi had, sort of done a number on him in the Celtic League. And many players spoke about it afterwards in different books. Alan English's book about the Road to Glory talked about, many players said that Agar was under pressure. Munster kicked off. Leinster, Matt O'Kelly dropped the ball. Gara kicked the penalty, and all of a sudden, I remember being at the game, and you just felt like we're going to win this game. Like this is going to be, a win today. And he was phenomenal, not just in his kicking. He missed one kick just before half time, but in his control, in his passing, in his leadership. That was the day I saw O'Gara as a real leader, because that people were talking about David Wallace and Paul O'Connell and guys like that, but O'Gara really took control of the game, not just by his own performance, but he kept guys going. He kept guys going who were struggling. And I mean, Dennis Hickey, you talk about the Leinster Christie sprint against Toulouse, made another sprint in the game, and O'Gara was back helping, you know, which people never gave him credit for his tackling and stuff, but he was. Then he obviously, you know, first half Munster were dominant. Then in the second half, Leinster took over the game, okay, and Contaponi missed ridiculous penalties. Like, I mean, it was, you know, like the three of us would have had better attempts. I mean, it was really awful, some of the kicking that he had on that day. And you know, but they were hanging in. They had closed the gap to 16-6, I think. They had missed 3 or 4 penalties, so they were sort of in the game. And then O'Gara gets the try with whatever 8 or 9 minutes to go, and you know, ran probably faster and farther than he's probably ever ran in his career at that point anymore since. Jumped to hoarding, you know, which was actually amazing, you know, and kind of really gave it to everybody. And I just thought that moment showed how much it really meant. I just remember as a player, Ger, when the pressure's really on and you're expected to deliver, and you deliver, the outbreak, bursting of feeling and emotions are enormous, and that's what happened to O'Gara at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think it's the becoming of that Munster team where they go from being a nearly team to legends, like days like that. Am I right? This is the Croke Park game, isn't it?
Lansdowne Road.
It is Lansdowne.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the Croke Park was the
reverse. You know,
but it was the fact that it was the old Lansdowne Road as well. That almost
right,
added.
yeah,
There's nothing wrong with the new Lansdowne Road atmosphere, but back in the old Lansdowne Road there was something different, Timmy, wasn't there, in terms of atmosphere? Like, it was just special, and
it was tight. And
it was tight and retro even, but like in its own way. Yeah,
it was. You felt you were on top of the pitch. You know, you felt you were like in with the players in that sense. It was obviously retro, and Munster at that point in time, you know, as you said, Ger, were the nearly men. They'd lost 2 Heineken Cups, and you know, and this really was. They went on to beat Biarritz, but if they hadn't got over Leinster would have started to become dominant earlier. I mean, they became dominant a couple of years later. So Munster may never have got the 2 titles that they got over that year and 2 years later if they hadn't. And O'Gara was really the catalyst. You know, it was the one game I would say, you know, he had many great games. I mean, he kicked drop goals, you know, to win on like Grand Slams. And but on that day, his performance was a complete performance from start to finish when he was really under pressure.
Yeah, it was totally sickening as a Leinster fan. So you know it's great when it's like, yeah, that one sticks in the craw. Right, on to the golf and the Ryder Cup in the same year, 2006. This is Darren Clark's Ryder Cup.
So I was an on-course commentator at the Ryder Cup for RT, and it's probably one of the highlights of my commentating career. And on the Friday, I got Woods and Furyk and Gossie and Donald in the afternoon, the foursomes, and Woods and Furyk lost 2-1. So I was on the tee box in the morning when Clark walked on, and you know, obviously his wife had passed away just a number of weeks previously. There was a lot of debate about, you know, he hadn't played for a while before the Ryder Cup. When he was picked, there was a lot of question marks about would he be able to stand up to the pressure, the emotional pressure, would his game stand up? You know, so there was a lot of question marks about him coming into the Ryder Cup at that point in time. And when he walked onto the first tee, because obviously as an on-course commentator you're inside the ropes, so you have a different perception of the atmosphere. It was just phenomenal. I mean, it was you know, a hairs the back of your head moment, like, or back of your neck raised. Like, it was just a moment in time where everything focused on Dan Clark, and then he went on obviously to hit a great tee shot, and they won that game. But I was commentating the next day in their match, in their 4-ball match against Woods and Furyk, and it was a big match because for Clark, I thought, because the day before was emotion and hype, and they got through it. Now it's just bread and butter. Now can you deliver? You know, you haven't played for a number of months, okay? Can you really stand up to the pressure now? Woods and Furyk had lost the day before, so you know, they wanted to respond in that sense, and the Americans were getting a bit of a trouncing at that point in time. And his golf was exceptional. I mean, you know, Dennis O'Sullivan, the senior pro, a European Tour pro, was with me on the co-commentary as we followed him. He got a birdie in 4 and 5 from nowhere, and you know, they went 3 up early on, then they went 4 up on the 14th. Furyk got a great win for the Americans on the 15th, so we crossed the road to the 16th. And I said to Dennis as we were walking along the fairway, I said, it'd be great if we got across the road, because it didn't look like it at one stage. So we crossed the road to 16th, the par 5 with the Liffey, splitting it in the green on the left hand side. Clark had an okay drive, okay, and then he laid up but he laid up into the rough on the right hand side, and it was torrential. The rain came from nowhere now in that sense. Westwood went into the water, so he was out of it, okay, and Woods hit a great shot, okay, to kind of give them a real chance for birdie. And so you're walking up, and there's a grandstand on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of the fairway, facing directly the green. And the emotion in the rain was just exceptional. And you're kind of saying, can he deliver now? Can Clark actually get over the line now in that sense? Because he had levelled off a bit, I felt, as the game went on that day. And he chipped in on the 16th. And, I was watching a thing recently, and there I am with Dennis O'Sullivan in the background as he's hugging Tiger Woods, and Timmy McCarthy and Dennis O'Sullivan on the back of the photograph at the back of it in that sense. But just, it was, even though Friday was the emotional day for him, the fact that he had the talent. Okay, because there were a lot of question marks about Clark's ability to deliver back then, because he won a major later on. But back then, he had a lot of chances.
Unfulfilled at that stage.
Unfulfilled. And he really delivered, particularly on the day that I commented on him. He really delivered. When the chips were down, early on in the game and late in the game, he stood out. And I just thought to myself that day, this guy's a serious golfer. And a major is inevitable at some point for him.
Did you meet Michael Jordan at the K Club that week?
That was the very first ever interview I ever did live.
Right.
Was it with Michael Jordan?
At the K Club?
At the K Club.
All right.
Okay. And so we had asked him, would he do an interview? We'd say Irish radio, because he wouldn't know who RT were at the point in time. And did you ever have a moment where it's the most exciting moment in your life and you ask the most stupid question that comes up?
Many, Timmy.
So there's about 1,000 people in an alcove as I'm talking to Michael Jordan. And there's obviously whatever number, 100,000 people listening to this live on radio. And I'm all excited, and Jordan is there, and I say, most stupid question that could come out of my mouth, what's it like to be in Dublin for the Ryder Cup? And he's about 6'6", and he shrugged his shoulders. He genuinely shrugged his shoulders. The crowd took an inhale of breath, and I'm feeling really lonely now. It's just sort of like, okay. And his answer was what my question deserved. He said, it's lovely. The people are lovely. The weather's lovely. The rain is lovely. The grass is lovely. The Guinness, it was all lovely, okay? And I remember at the time, the director in my ear saying, like, this has been cut, like, that's it, like, okay? And I'm saying, I need to resolve this. And so I said, to make the last second shot against Utah in Game 6 and to make a putt to win the Ryder Cup, what's the comparison? And for 3.5 minutes, he just went to a different level.
Great.
He talked about focus, about being in the moment, about having practiced, he told me he was buddies with a lot of these guys, and they were at his house. It was just a brilliant. And at the very end, I said, well, it's been a lifelong ambition of yours to meet me, Michael, which you've done here today, and an ambition of mine to meet yours. So from Timmy and Michael, high fives and back to the studio. For 3 days, he hugged me and high-fived me every time he passed.
Nice.
You wouldn't know who I am today, which is fine, but for those 3 days...
Did you get to go out for dinner?
No, we didn't get for dinner, I didn't get for a drink, but...
No playing golf for like 10 grand a hole?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't afford that.
Jeez, that's the biggest flex I've heard in a long time now. High fives from Michael Jordan for 3 days in a row at the club.
It was actually, and it was, it's a great lesson though, as a commentator or for anybody. It doesn't always have to go right the first time. It's how you recover, and just, and you, like, this guy's like, you're on your own, like you have to fix it, like, otherwise they're going to take it out. But his intensity when he spoke about that shot, I mean, they beat Utah in Game 6. He stole Utah were a point up. The ball went into Karl Malone down in the low block. He stole the ball from Malone and went down the court and held himself near one of the most famous shots ever to make the shot to win it with 5 seconds to go. And when I asked him about it, and he knew I knew him, because that was the difference. He knew then I knew him, and I knew his focus and his intensity.
Go interview the tall basketballer. No, you're somebody who's like, okay, I can communicate with you now.
Yeah. And he was we were in the same zone, and from that point of view, and I did say to him, you're obviously for the Americans. No, my friends, Luke is my buddy. He's with me all the time. So he was very open about his relationship with a lot of the European players, and that's it. He obviously wanted the Americans to win.
Yeah, okay. So that's a nice segue to our last one, which is basketball as well. So this is Kobe in the 2008 Olympic final.
So this is probably the best professional performance I've ever seen when the chips are really down. Okay? This is going to come out in 2 weeks' time on Netflix. There's a new program called The Redeem Team.
Right.
So this is about this actual cup final, okay? It's not the reason I picked it. I picked it because when you look at the background to it, America had come in 92, the Dream Team, and in 96 they won, and in 2000 they won. In the 2002 World Cup, America were beaten by 3 teams, okay? First time in their professional era, so they were really struggling. They lost in 2004 to Argentina. I get my first Olympic commentaries game to Argentina in the semi-finals. So they were first time they were beaten at Olympic level since the professional era. real big issue. And in 2006, Greece beat them in the World Cup. Okay, and in the 2006 team, they had LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade. So they had powerhouses, even though they were young at that point in time. Kobe hadn't played for the USA, and in 2007, because they hadn't won the World Championships, they had to go and qualify in America, in the Americas. So they qualified for the Olympics. That was Kobe's first event. He had won 3 NBA titles with the Lakers, with Shaq O'Neal, but now he had just lost an NBA title without Shaq to the Celtics.
So the debate was at that time, like, was he reliant on having somebody like Shaq in the team? Could he carry a team on his own? Was he the real superstar that everybody was saying?
Because the talk was he was the next Michael Jordan, or was he going to replace Michael Jordan? That was the big debate at that point in time. So he was coming into the Olympics with an American program that was struggling, even though they had brought in Mike Krzyzewski as the coach and from Duke, and he made a big difference to them. And they were playing Spain, who were world champions. So they beat Spain in the group. But 2 things were very interesting. And the Redeem team, I just saw some highlights of it. Actually, will highlight this. In his first practice session with the team, the first ball broke. He dived on the floor. Now, he's the biggest superstar in this team. And all of a sudden, he's going to set the tone. Like, I'm here for serious business. And in the group match, they played Spain, and Pau Gasol was now his teammate at the Lakers instead of Shaq O'Neal. And he said to his players, the first chance I get, I'm going to knock him over. And in the very first play, Gasol set a screen and he took him out.
Right.
Illegally, no. He just took him out illegally. But he's sending a message like, you're not my teammate here. You're my brother with the Lakers, but I'm playing for the USA. So we get to the final, and both the top 2 teams meet in the final. And it's a phenomenal game of basketball, and it's nip and tuck. But the Americans are in trouble. In quarter 4, the Spanish had brought it back to a 1-point game without hitting a 3-pointer for about 8 minutes in a row. So they were dominating the game on the inside. The 2 Gasol brothers, 7-2 each, were dominating the game. And the Americans, LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Carmelo, they were kind of hiding, would be my view of it, okay? And Kobe took over the game. He just took over the game. He scored 13 points. When the game was on the line, he made a couple of assists to other people. And that day, in my view, I said, well, this guy is almost as good as Michael Jordan. I believe Jordan's the best I've ever seen, but this guy is almost as good as Michael Jordan, because he did it when it mattered. He did it for his country, because if they had lost that Olympics, they would have been in real trouble, because now they'd have lost 4 international tournaments in a row, and it would have questioned the whole professional ethos that had been brought in '92 from the Americans.
It's funny how the team matters more to them than we think it does. That it's not just like a box ticking for the sponsors. That actually, because they're all rich beyond their wildest dreams. So like they don't do it just for extra endorsements from brands who they might not be able to access otherwise. It has to mean something to them. Otherwise, it's going to be perfunctory, and they're not going to put in performances like this.
Well, Kobe said when he was selected, he said that this is my country. We're playing, this is not, the Lakers or the Celtics or the Mavs or the Heat. Like, this is us playing for our country. And what Coach K did, he brought in Navy SEALs, he brought in Marines to talk to them about what it's like to be in battle for your country. So it was a real big thing. And obviously they were coming into it after losing 3 major tournaments in a row, 2 World Cups and in Olympic Games. So it means more to them. And when you, like, I'm really looking forward to this Redeem Team Netflix program now, because it'll go behind the fact that this was Redeem or really question what the Americans were going to do with the professionals in the Olympics. So it was a phenomenal environment, and they do really step up when they're playing for their country,
It kind of kick-started a period for the Lakers as well, for a couple of years, ironically, with Pau Gasol alongside Kobe as well.
Because they came back and won 2 NBAs then in that sense, together over the next number of years in that sense. So it really kick-started. It elevated his not his career, because he had won it with Shaq obviously, but it kick-started his career, where he now was the man. As you said earlier, there was a question mark, who was the man when Shaq was there in that sense, right? Okay. Scottie Pippen has come out in the last number of years and said he was better than Jordan, so obviously he had a few drinks too much that night when he decided to say that. But it was Jordan and the cast. Okay, in the Lakers it was Kobe and Shaq. Then after the Olympics, it was Kobe was the main man with the cast. So I think that's what it changed my lens of Kobe. So it wasn't Kobe and Shaq; it was Kobe and the cast, which brought him to the level of Jordan in that sense.
When did you start commentating?
I started commentating in 1991 as my first time involved with RT as an analyst. So I used to do the pre-game view, the half-time view, and then the post-game view. And back then there was no recording. So if you said something at the start of half time before the game, you could say something different at half time.
As I said earlier, I absolutely predicted they were going to win.
But then the following year, they asked me, in addition to the analyst role, would I become a Cork commentator at the Ger Canning? And I did that then until 2004. And at the 2004 games, I was there a day before Ger Canning. I was to do co-commentary on the men's with Ger and co-commentary with Sean O'Sullivan on the women's. And I was there the day before, and RT said, can you go in and commentate on that game, because there's this programme might finish early,
right?
We need to fill, okay? And I said, I've never commentated. Well, they said, look, it doesn't matter. Just we probably won't see it, but so just go in. And it was a women's game, which went to overtime, and I just commentated as I commentate now, and the director got a phone call and said, you should listen to this. So they played it actually because they'd had to fill. And the next day they said, will you commentate? And Ger went off to do volleyball, and Sean became the analyst.
When you were doing the co-coms, were you the same as you are as a commentator? Were you doing downtown and boom shakalaka? No.
I would say as an analyst, I was people. I remember Ger and Shane, you mentioned him earlier, referred to me as a Conor O'Shea or a Colm O'Rourke, very articulate, But they're different roles. My job as an analyst is to give an expert view on what happens. Okay? Why I believe my commentary works in my world is because I played at that level. I've coached at that level. So the game is not in question for me anymore. My job as a commentator, I believe, is to inform and entertain.
Well, I think it's actually more important is your enthusiasm for it, like the love that you have it comes through, and whether or not you played at the high level, because they're two different skills in a way, Yes. So as an analyst, were you kind of constantly tamping down that part of you that wanted to be like, this is unbelievable, everybody?
Oh no, I would still be very.
But a little part of you weren't accessing a little part of you when
I was more clinical, I suppose, in the sense, and more not more articulate, because I believe I'm very articulate as a commentator.
And so when the commentary started to happen, did you suddenly realise that this was what I was supposed to be doing?
Yes.
And what's that like? What's that experience?
It's an amazing experience. And then I had an opportunity. I did a few GA games, and because at that time RT were looking at maybe use me in GA, and that really excited me. I did Donegal and Antrim on the day Antrim beat Donegal,
right?
So it became the prime game on Sunday game. I did Waterford and Limerick in the Munster hurling semi-final replay, and I love that because I had a great passion for that as well. So I would love to have done more of that in that sense, okay? But I just when I did a commentary, I felt much more excited at the end of it, and much more sort of, oh my God, feeling, wow, I should do more of this. It's just, I love the analyst role, but I really should do more. And I love the co-commentator role, but I really felt I was made to be a commentator.
They're all totally different roles, really, aren't
they?
Yeah,
very different roles.
You mentioned Jimmy McGee earlier, and Eddie Butler's a name that's come up obviously on the show in the last number of weeks as someone who inspired a lot of people to tune into matches. Were there commentators either then or now that you look at in any different sports and say, that they added to the event, I guess?
Well, Jimmy McGee was very helpful to me, actually, when I was starting, and Ger Canning, both of them were actually very helpful to me. Because when the director said we want Timmy to do the commentary, Ger said absolutely, that's a great idea, and he went. But Jimmy McGee said to me, remember, he says that you've got to be yourself. He says, don't try and be anybody else. One of the things that some people make a mistake, they try and imitate. He says, learn from other commentators, he says, in that sense, but be yourself in that sense. So Murray Walker was another guy. I thought Murray Walker's enthusiasm, was just, again, infectious. And, even if you didn't really understand the game, he kept you at the game in that sense. And so they'd be the two that would, that would sort of stand out for me in that sense.
But that makes sense. I think that definitely comes across. Like if there was a basketball game on in the Olympics and it was two teams who you didn't have that much interest or knowledge about, and you were doing the commentary, people were stopping to watch. That was true. Everybody was like, "We're going to watch this. Timmy's on commentary."
And that's very humbling because because people are watching it who don't understand the game.
No, totally. Yeah.
And And I've always believed, you must be enthusiastic for what you're about. You must have a passion for it in that sense. And, like, what gives me an advantage is the fact that I played and coached at that level, Ger, is I just know the game a little bit from their perspective. It just gives me a different perspective. I still have to commentate on what I see, but I understand what a player's experiencing or a coach is trying to consider it in the context of it. But I just love commentating, and and hopefully there's many more things I can get my hands into.
100%. Timmy, always great to spend time in your company. Thanks a million. That was a great episode of You Had to Be